Russian President Vladimir Putin announced today during a meeting with military leadership that Russian forces have made significant advances on the front. Moscow claims successes on several battlefronts are fundamentally shifting the situation in Russia's favor. These claims were made during ongoing heavy fighting, and we will now break them down one by one, along with the context and the reactions from the other side. According to the Russian leadership, Russian forces were supposed to have captured the city of Mirnohrad in the Donetsk region. Moscow calls this a major achievement in the broader battle for Pokrovsk, one of the longest and toughest clashes on this front, ongoing in phases for over a year. Mirnohrad is near Pokrovsk and serves as part of its defense and logistics base. From the Russian perspective, this is a city whose capture is meant to weaken Ukrainian defenses in the entire area, complicate supply lines, and create space for further advances. That is why Mirnohrad has become the target of constant pressure in recent months. Russian sources report heavy fighting involving large forces in the area. According to them, at certain stages, tens of thousands of soldiers. The Ukrainian defense planned to use fewer units, relying on prepared defenses, fortifications, and terrain knowledge. The fighting was supposed to take place not only on access roads, but also around industrial zones and residential districts. According to the Russian version of events, the city was gradually encircled. Russian units were supposed to cut off supply routes, put pressure on the northern and southern flanks of the defense, and create pressure that would force Ukrainian forces to retreat. Moscow claims that the result of this approach is taking control of the city. If Russian reports are confirmed, it would indicate the battle for Pokrovsk is nearing its final phase. That would let the Russians focus on Ukraine's last major Donbass positions. It is also the Ukrainian power center for the Sloviansk and Kramatorsk area. From the Ukrainian perspective, Mirnohrad was not defended as a single stronghold, but as part of a larger defensive line. This is one of the reasons why claims about its capture are disputed and why the actual situation on the ground is subject to different interpretations. Mirnohrad exemplifies how battles in Donbass are often fought. Instead of directly attacking large cities, Russian forces are first trying to capture smaller satellite locations that form a defensive and logistical ring. In this way, the defense of larger cities is gradually weakened without the need for immediate street fighting, which is extremely costly for both sides. Mirnohrad doesn't serve as a target itself, but as part of a broader pressure strategy on the entire Pokrovsk sector. The second city whose capture Moscow announced today is Huliajpole in the Zaporizhzhia region. This section of the front was considered relatively stable for many months, with no major movements and outside the main media focus. The situation changed a few weeks ago when Russian forces launched an offensive on what had been a dormant sector. This was followed by a swift Russian breakthrough of Ukrainian lines and steady pressure pushing Ukrainian defenses toward the city. Huliajpole holds both symbolic and practical importance. It is a key point in southeastern Ukraine's defense, protecting access to other areas in the Zaporizhzhia region. If the Russian claims were confirmed, it would mean one of the most significant shifts on this front in a long time. The Russian side describes the advance as a combination of heavy artillery preparation, intensive use of drones, and attacks by smaller strike groups, which were supposed to gradually break down the Ukrainian defense. He says Ukrainian units were unprepared for such a large offensive and lacked time to build full defensive positions in depth. However, this area is especially hard to verify information. The front line there is less clear. Fighting occurs in open areas and villages, with territory control shifting rapidly. Ukraine denies Russia captured Mirnohrad and Huliajpole. According to official statements from Kiev, Ukrainian forces have not lost these cities, and fighting in their vicinity continues. The Ukrainian command speaks of repelled attacks, maneuver warfare, and says that the situation in both sectors remains dynamic. Kyiv also points out that Russia repeatedly announces the capture of cities, even while fighting is still ongoing in them or in their immediate vicinity. In practice, this often means that Russian units may control part of the territory or some access roads, but not the entire city in its entirety. Actual control over Mirnohrad and Huliajpole remains unconfirmed. Frontline reports, satellite images, and visual evidence that would clearly confirm Russian claims have not yet been published. That's why each side presents a different view of the situation. At the same time, the Ukrainian side emphasizes that the defense in the east and south of the country is based on the principle of defense in depth. This means that even a possible withdrawal from one location does not automatically mean the collapse of the entire line, but rather the transfer of fighting to other prepared positions. With similar announcements, it is also important to explain what each side means by the term capture of the city. In practice, it does not always mean complete control over the entire area, but often the control of part of the buildings, industrial zones, or main access roads. It is common at the front for one side to declare the capture of a city while fighting continues in its surroundings, and the line of contact keeps changing for several days or weeks. Gaining control of the city doesn't end the fighting. It just moves the conflict to the outskirts or the next defensive line. In the broader context of developments at the front, it is worth mentioning the case of the city of Siversk, which is not part of today's Russian statements, but illustrates how the situation in some areas has gradually evolved in recent weeks. Siversk is now under Russian control, as confirmed by Ukrainian mapping projects like Deep State. The front line has shifted west of the city, and Siversk itself is no longer at the center of active fighting. Fighting for the city continued for months, and Russia declared its capture while the situation remained unclear. However, Ukrainian units gradually retreated to new defensive lines because of heavy artillery and encirclement threats. The result is a shift in the front line, which is now generally accepted even by the Ukrainian side. Siversk is a real confirmed Russian gain achieved through sustained pressure and gradual weakening of defenses, not a sudden event. The situation in Kupiansk is developing very differently. Russian units have recently made significant advances and nearly took control of the city. Moskva has already suggested that the fall of Kupiansk is only a matter of time. However, a Ukrainian counterattack surprised the Russian forces. Ukrainian units managed to penetrate the Russian rear, disrupt supply routes, and put pressure on units that had advanced too far without sufficient protection of their flanks. As a result, part of the Russian forces found themselves in a complicated situation in the area, with some units being pushed back and others ending up partially encircled. Kupiansk thus became an example that even long-term pressure and numerical superiority do not automatically guarantee success, especially if the opponent is able to respond quickly and in a coordinated manner. The situation on the front remains unclear, and Russian claims have not yet been independently confirmed. In the coming days, it will therefore be crucial to monitor whether Russian claims about Mirnohrad and Huliajpole appear on independent maps and satellite images, or whether the fighting in these areas will continue without a clear outcome. The developments in these sectors will show whether this is a real shift in the front line or just another phase of attritional fighting.
If you liked the video, I would appreciate a like and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next ones I'm currently working on. You can support my work by thanking me and help the video reach more people by clicking praise. Thank you.